IronPath Expert Series webinar. Today's session is entitled MSP Marketing Machine, How Mytech Leverages Webinars and Events. My name is Ted Holsey. I'm CEO and founder of IronPath and your host for today's event. Two quick housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be circulated to all registrants. And please ask questions as we go along. IronPath helps MSP leaders achieve their dreams. We deliver sales and marketing services to MSPs and growth-oriented vendors. I'm personally excited about today's topic. I have known Nate Austin and the Mytech Partners team for well over a decade. It has been exciting to watch them grow and thrive as an organization. I think the Mytech team has a ton of information to share with growing MSPs today, so I'm really looking forward to today's session. Now let me introduce our guests. First up is Nate Austin. Nate brings over 20 years of IT business management experience to his current position as VP of Business Development at Mytech. Since co-founding Mytech Partners in 2000, he has focused on helping clients achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments through implementing proven IT strategies that align with client goals. Mytech serves the small and medium business community as a managed services, security, and consulting provider, and strives to make IT easy for their respective clients. Additionally, he is the author of an upcoming book, Capitalism and Community, A Partnership for a Better Tomorrow. Nate, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Ted. We're looking forward to the session.
Okay, and next up is Stephanie Kingslien. With over 15 years of navigating the evolving sales and marketing techniques within the technology landscape, Stephanie feels she has found her home as the marketing and communications manager at Mytech Partners. She enjoys collaborating with others to connect the dots between the services Mytech provides and the needs of the organizations they serve. Stephanie, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Ted. Looking forward to it.
All right, well, let's get into it. I'm gonna hand Nate the ball, and let's see here. Okay. Oh, let's see here. I clicked the wrong thing. Hold on a second. I'm gonna make you the presenter. There you go, Nate. Sorry about that.
Looks like you also muted him.
Ah, okay.
There
we go.
Yeah, it's all good.
We actually know how to do this, believe it or not.
Technology.
Yes. Yeah, so I think I chose to share my screen so everybody can see the screen.
Got it.
Yep, good to go. All right, great. Yeah, welcome everyone. This is we enjoy sharing. One of the things like people have asked us over the years whenever we've shared just tips and tricks and things like that, that's really come out of the peer group interaction that we've had going back to 2006, and where we've learned that there's more value in being able to share and learn from each other than to try and keep our secrets hidden. So so we're not trying to, Mytech is not trying to sell services to MSPs. That's what Ted's here to do, and to help serve and support MSPs. But our job is we're just trying to share some of the experience that we've had over the, it's been almost a decade of doing webinars and sessions and events where we've really done it. But just some lessons learned, tips and tricks. So let's start with the why. I don't know, Stephanie, do you want to take any of these to start off some of the whys that are here on the screen?
It's up to you. You can pass them to me, or if you want to take them, I can definitely add anything if you'd like.
Well, I'll kick it off, but definitely join in. So, first and foremost, it's fun to talk about things that you're knowledgeable about. We talk about driving interests about your products and sales, but it's really, don't forget about yourself. I think because it's great to be providing value. That's definitely what you want to be able to do, but don't forget that you're trying to do this for a reason. And so I think that's one of the things that try and find ways in which you can creatively, talk about interests that drive your products and services, right? So, and it also is just, because ultimately you do want to get a call to action. So that's some of the stuff we'll talk about too, is that you want to get a call to action out of these sessions. And sometimes that might just be, hey, come to another event. The call to action could be, hey, please raise your hand. But you do want to try and get some sort of interest in what you're doing. I know that sounds obvious, but it's not always well done. And we didn't do it very well when we first started. So that's one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about that. The second thing is we also feel that doing events, especially if you do them over the lessons that we've learned in doing them, that it does help differentiate you from your competition. And I also relate those two to the fourth bullet here, which is provide sales team with follow-up resources. One of the things that I learned as a sales professional when I was still selling, owner-led selling in our MSP, was that it allowed me to reach out to prospects and clients when I didn't have another reason to reach out to them. If I just wanted to like try and provide something, try and say, hey, try and get their attention, because I wanted to have a conversation with them when maybe they didn't want to talk to me because I'm the salesperson, right? So, but this gave me an opportunity to demonstrate that I'm trying to add value to them. So that's one of the other reasons why we've chosen to do like webinars and virtual events and do them on a more frequent basis, because instead of having one big event a quarter or one, a couple of big events a year, which take a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of time, and it only gives your sales team one or two opportunities to reach out and to follow up with folks. So it's one of the reasons why we try and do them on, today we're now at a frequency of every other week is what we try and do for events. The other thing that, and Stephanie, maybe you could talk about the lower costs of entry for prospects, because I think this is something that we learned from a marketing agency that is really critical as well.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing to the helping you differentiate as well, is that, in marketing, our website and our collateral is how we speak to prospects and clients. And almost 99% of the time, it's the same thing that we're putting out there. We have great customer service. We have, really secure solutions. And on paper, all these things sound and look exactly the same. And I think virtual events and webinars give you that chance to add I would say, sprinkles to the conversation that make you different. So this is where people can really get to know you as an organization and kind of your philosophies and what you're an expert in, that they don't see on a piece of collateral or your website. So, but yeah, as far as the lower cost of entry for prospects, we worked with a marketing agency the last few years, and one thing that they said to us a couple of years ago really stuck out to me was the fact that as MSPs, most of what we sell is thousands of dollars and sometimes multi-year contracts. And without really getting to know us, that's a big commitment. It's a big first ask. And so they challenge us to think through, what could we quote unquote sell that would gain a client earlier and for less money. And when we come to thinking about the marketing funnel, that high level funnel, the first thing that we want our prospects to spend with us is time. So this is asking for 30 minutes of their time, which is still a cost to them, but it gets them in the door. They're now quote unquote a client of ours. They've spent their time, and then we want to lead them down that path. Versus, as we all know, in the MSP world, it's very difficult to come right out the gate with a 3-year contract for managed services. So this just helps build that top of the line funnel and gives them that like lower cost, no commitment to get through that barrier of entry. So.
Yeah, because if the only ask you have on your website is schedule a meeting or do a free assessment with me, which it's a little pet peeve, but if that's the only ask, then you might be missing a lot of opportunity to at least get people starting to engage and starting that funnel. So that's and that was one of our challenges. So that's why that came up, is that we didn't do a good job of that a few years ago. The other thing that was a nice byproduct, and then we'll just get out of the whys and get into the details and the nitty-gritty that everyone's probably more interested in if you're attending today, is that as a byproduct, it also created training content for our team. So if you were very intentional about developing these sessions and talking about the why and the content and the problems that the information or the solution solves, at the same time, and you're trying to bring on new engineers or train or onboard new salespeople or account managers, or even finance folks, if they want to try and learn about what it is you do, here you go. You've got a bunch of webinars and events that are already recorded that you can tee up for them to say, hey, I want you to watch these sessions so you can learn about the things that we do and the solutions that we provide. So because I know that's always a problem especially as an owner-led, nearly, these MSPs, including ourselves, it was a nice byproduct for that too, because it, as Stephanie likes to say, it fed two birds with one scone. So let's move on. So here's some of the lessons that we've learned. And I'm not going to just read the bullets to you, But really one of the things that we've learned is you really have to narrow the scope. We forget as technologists sometimes how even the most basic pieces that we do and that we assume are easy aren't easy for the majority of our audience and to attract attention. When some of the ones, which we'll show you one of them later, it's just like how to hold meetings in teams. It's something that seems really basic if you're a technologist, but if you're trying to educate and try and teach your team or help your clients teach their team, that's actually something they really need. So keep it basic and narrow your focus. And then that way you can keep the content to 30 minutes or less. Yeah, don't forget to tell them what you do. One of my favorites about this is that when we first started doing a lot of in-person events and we were doing some training around Microsoft 365 and that suite, we got a lot of people that thought we were a training organization because we were training, but we didn't actually say we're not a training organization. We actually are a managed services provider. So once we got, it didn't even dawn on us to do that because we just assumed that people would know who we are and what we did. But when you've got that captive audience, be clear up front, quickly, briefly, that you're not a training organization, unless that's something you're trying to sell, then that'd be great. But we're not trying to sell training. We're just trying to use that as a value add to get prospects and clients served. Yeah, schedule time in the middle of the week. Yeah, the lunch hour has been good. We typically do our webinars at 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain Time because we work in the Central and Mountain time zones. I don't know, that's just been typically that's worked for us. And we've also learned to try and focus on the content, to just blow through the content and then open up for Q&A afterwards. Not that you can't have Q&A throughout, like in a Q&A chat or something like that if you have a moderator going through it, but we also want to use that as opportunity to share that Q&A and actually answer those questions after the fact. So that way you could, for the sake of the recording, you knock through the content, you've got 30 minutes of core content, and then if people want to drop off either in the recorded version or in the live version, they can do that. So that's one of the reasons we've done that, what we have found. And then like we talked about or alluded to earlier is be prescriptive with the call to action, right? So what do you want them to do? So you get to the end, what do you want them to do? Depending on what you're offering, maybe you have a landing page that says, hey, we've put more information on this, and if you want to raise your hand, go to this landing page, maybe put the link in the chat or send it in a follow-up email with the link to the recording. Or you say, hey, one of the things that we've been trying to do is we've been trying to get more YouTube subscribers and LinkedIn followers. We actually say one of our core call to actions is, hey, like us or follow us on LinkedIn and or subscribe to our YouTube channel. So those are some of the key calls to action, but be prescriptive about what you want them to do and don't make it 10 calls to action because you're lucky if you're going to get them to do 1 or 2. Those are the key lessons, just kind of walking through those bullets a little bit. So Stephanie, any thoughts or comments to add on that?
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit too more, but even with that call to action, be realistic. Like, what would you expect the call to action to be for what you just gave? So you gave 30 minutes of your time. Would you expect that it's an on-site meeting or something like that? Probably not. Now, if you've attended 2, 3, 4 of them, maybe, but maybe just put yourself in their shoes on what's reasonable for that call to action. And then I just mimic what you said, Nate, not too many of them. It's really easy to be like, check out this webpage and download this ebook and do this. Just focus on what that is and just drive that home.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. I really love this slide. It's something that I feel like Stephanie and I know try to be advocates and proponents and staunch supporters of the information here. So the first one is candidly, and I know that this might offend some technologists that are listening or watching now or listening in the future. Clients don't care about the technology. They don't care about the speeds and feeds, the widgets, and one of our clients calls it gigajigs. They don't care about any of that. They care about the problem that it solves. And so that's actually, if we walk down like this progression, they care about the problem that your solution solves, not the technology that does it, which then leads to focus on the problems you can solve. So try and reverse engineer the solutions that you have. How does that play out to problems that you can solve? And the other thing that makes it easier to identify the problems you can solve is that if you drink your own champagne, right? If you use the same solutions that you sell to your clients, it's way easier, especially for salespeople who are not technical. If they use the solutions that you're selling, it's going to be easy for them to sell. So drink your own champagne, get your team used to using it. It'll be easy for them to support it and easy for them to sell it. But at the same time, it provides you, well, what are the problems that you've solved using this technology? Guess what? Your clients have the exact same problem. So just use that as conduit and as fodder for being able to come up with content that's valuable. And again, we do try and do some sort of a leave behind. What are the takeaways? One of my, and I don't always do this, but if you've ever seen any of our sessions or if you ever watch them in the future, I try and put a summary slide that, how people sometimes in their presentation will take a picture of the PowerPoint that's being presented. I try and have a slide that at the end is like, here are your key takeaways. Here are the key lessons learned, where I connect the dots, the summary dots from the session. And that's right before then the call to action. So that's, again, the key areas that I would say about this. Just, I don't want to belabor all this too much, but other than your clients don't care about the technology. If you're mid-market and they're IT folks and they're buying the speeds and feeds, that's different. But if you're trying to sell to business owners and operators, which typically the managed services providers are, they don't care about the technology. I don't know, Stephanie, any further thoughts?
The only thing to add to this is, when you're thinking about what you're going to present on, the title, the description. So thinking through that, so we're talking about the problem that you're going to solve, and be very intentional to call that out in the title. We've done sessions in the past where we quickly learned that we were too broad in our title or too cute with the naming, and the people that came to the session, it didn't match what they were expecting to come away with from the session. So be very bold and write in that title and then description, give it, here's the problem, here's what we're going to solve, and then what are they going to walk away from. That way they're coming to that session knowing exactly what it's going to be about.
Yeah, and I would say, Stephanie, we've learned that just because people have given us feedback. When typically, and I found this and I'm sure all the folks listening or watching, if you've ever gone to a conference, that you go to a session and you feel like the description that got you interested in going to the session, and then you go to the session and it's like, well, that's not really what I thought. That just frustrates you because now you wasted your time. So, and whenever I as a presenter when we've done this stuff have gotten negative feedback, it's typically because we didn't do a good job being specific of the content. And so the attendee, not saying we're always great presenters, because we definitely make mistakes, but where we've gotten the most negative feedback is typically when we mismatch this point, is we mismatched being very prescriptive about what the title is and what the description is and what the content's going to cover, so that the people can choose whether or not it's time that they want to invest with you. So yeah, that's a great follow-up point, Stephanie. Okay, so common problems. Again, this goes back to drink your own champagne. If you have the problem, chances are your clients have the problem. So what are those common problems that you solve? Whether it be a security problem, a productivity problem, or a efficiency problem, like using Microsoft 365 tools, for example. But talking about security, people aren't going to really necessarily care that it's a SonicWall firewall. Well, sorry, SonicWall, great product, but your clients don't care the name on the box. They care the solution that you bring to them. And so trying to filter through that, which is also one of the reasons, by the way, which is not what this slide's about, is we've gotten away over the years from actually bringing in our manufacturer vendor partners to collaborate on webinars. It's not that they're not bright, intelligent, competent, articulate people. It's that they're used to selling their product and their speeds and feeds and all the value to us as managed services providers, and they're not typically used to being able to translate that into language that our clients really value and understand, and the problems that we're trying to solve, because they're worried about their product. And so that's one of the things that I have gotten away from, as far as leveraging the tools you already own, but don't focus on the tool, focus on the solution. One of the other problems that I imagine we all have, and I know we have it, is driving change. If you're really trying to make a change in the organization, like say using Teams versus Zoom or Slack or something like that, it's a common problem that's happened in the last year for a lot of small businesses, is, well, how do you affect that change? And what are the ways in which you can really drive adoption so you don't create chaos and confusion in your organization? Your clients have that problem, so do you. If you can figure out a unique way to solve it, guess what? You now have something that you can sell to your clients. And then, yeah, just how do you solve these problems? I don't know, any other thoughts on that, Stephanie?
No, I think that the biggest thing is that what we found is sessions, a few years ago, we focused on sessions that were like 25 tips and tricks for using Microsoft Teams, right? Which is fantastic. But if I really think of it in my daily life, you know, am I going to take an hour out of my day to go listen to 25 tips and tricks that I don't even know if maybe I know all of them, or maybe I don't even need any of them? So that's where we really started focusing, to what Nate said earlier, is we heard maybe a salesperson say, like, I don't really understand the difference between SharePoint and Teams. Light bulb goes off. If we don't understand that, that's a session that we could do, because that's going to help bring visibility to it. So just mimicking everything you said, just listen internally. What struggles do you have? Because if we're struggling to understand something, our clients are definitely. But don't just, I guess, don't do it. I would just recommend not doing a session to help them understand it, but how is it going to enhance their daily work life? So it's not just about knowing more about Teams. It's more about how can I use it better to communicate with other teammates or things like that. So it took us a while to kind of switch into that thinking.
And I want to jump in. I want to jump in with a question. I know you guys maybe want to have the questions at the end.
That's
but,
okay. No, that's fine.
I love. And remember, like, the thing about webinars is make it your own style. And I love questions that interrupt the flow of conversation.
It's all good.
Tell us a little bit about. So I loved the story you just told, Stephanie, about the light bulb going off, where you had a salesperson where they had this question, which was like seemingly very obvious, but it's not. It's like it's a gold mine of content, like explaining the different file collaboration approaches at Microsoft. I mean, it's like you need a PhD to unravel the whole thing at some level. But tell us about your process of building like an editorial calendar. You guys are super well organized. You guys have produced hundreds of webinars. So share with the audience a little bit about how you go from that one salesperson's just burning question that became a topic to how do you do that habitually and have a process around it so you have a nice editorial calendar going forward.
I guess I could take that. So it's we basically, every time we're hearing something, we actually have a SharePoint list where we will actually throw that in there to talk about at a later date. And we try it right now. Our flow has been to try and plan quarterly. So we look over the next quarter about events that we might want to, and we go through the list and we try and pair ones that we think would be good together. You know, is this maybe a part 1 and a part 2? Is it too much about ransomware in 1 month and we need to spread that out a little bit? So right now we're doing events about every other week for virtual webinars, and then we have a longer version that we go a little bit deeper every other month, and we're looking over the quarter. Right now we are in planning session for Q3, so that's why our events page is a little light right now, because we are about to launch all the events through Q3 so that we can continually market them throughout the quarter. Nate, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think, Ted, it's what's pertinent. It's what are we hearing from our sales team. We try and stay, Stephanie, I mean, I work directly with the sales team on a regular basis, so that's where I get a lot of information. And Stephanie connects with our sales team, I think once a month at least, to do some updates and do some collaboration. So we try and take a lot of it from just that kind of feedback. But I also think one of the things that's been key for us is the quarterly planning, but also, like, even this morning, I can't even remember what I was doing, but I was reviewing something, or I was preparing for a meeting, and I thought about, gosh, this would probably be a good idea for an event. So I went out to our SharePoint list. In that moment, I put it on my list. So it was like, hey, so next time we sit down, we're going to look at that list and see, here's some ideas that we had thought about through the quarter. So we're not just trying to come up with everything when we sit down that once a quarter to figure out these events. So those are some of the ways in which we go about it. And then what we also have done is we take let's take some of our existing meetings that I've got on the screen here. Is it 5 ways to hold meetings in Teams was one of the most popular topics that we had, especially with the start of the pandemic. We did that very early on, shortly after things went in lockdown. But guess what? Microsoft's also changed a lot in the last 15 months. So we're actually going to be revisiting some of these sessions. Or we find that we get feedback from a session and again, we assumed the basics too much. So we realized, like, one of the sessions we did, it was titled, it's not on here, but it's OneDrive. Isn't that just SharePoint? Because, like, so many people ask that question, and they get confused by it. So we know that's a question that people ask, and so even though that sounds really basic to us, it was a widely impactful event just because it actually simplified something that is a question that we hear a lot of people ask. So I think there's several different ways. There's no one way that we do it, but I guess that's oftentimes the kind of the process that we've gone through that we found successful.
Yeah, two more notes just to add to that, Nate, and is one, the Q&A throughout the sessions too. Take note of that. If they're asking it in the QA, you didn't cover it in the session, and it might be an opportunity to go deeper in that later. And then second point that you made, Nate, that I just wanted to touch on too was another reason why quarterly is because our world is constantly changing, and if we go more than a quarter out in events, the topic may not be relevant anymore. So we try and keep it pretty close.
Yeah, and I guess I just would just jump in with a comment that I think don't underestimate just the magic of answering questions. I mean, I think that habit of spending time with sales, or if you're a business leader who are continually in a sales mode, just all those burning questions you're getting from prospects or from clients, that's what you want your marketing to answer. And then there's a whole bunch of marketing gurus on YouTube you can go see who are on stage at big fancy trade shows preaching this, but it just makes total sense. It's just, answer questions. And if you continually in your marketing are educational and are providing answers to your public, to your audience, they're going to be magnetic with your brand and with your team, and they're going to stay close to you. Whether they need you now or they need you 2 years from now, they're going to stay close to you as a brand and as a trustworthy resource who really differentiates yourself because you actually are giving them knowledge and education.
Yeah, the only last thing I'd say on that, Ted, is that I feel like, and I'm going to try and speak to the owner-led, technical owner-led, in particular folks that might be listening now or in the future, is that find someone on your team that will challenge you. Because one of the things I really appreciate about the way Stephanie and I and our marketing team collaborates is that sometimes I have a little bit more technical background. I have, goes back 20 years, technical certifications and stuff, but like I assume too much because of some of that knowledge, and that works against me sometimes when we're doing this. And so I really appreciate the collaboration and the talk and the discussion and the pushback. I was like, and Stephanie, I love that Stephanie does this, is like, let's make it, how can we make it simpler? Like, we can boil this down. You're making, so she actually challenges me really well. And so that collaboration and that dialogue. So if you're that person in your team, and I'm not as technical as many of you that are probably listening in, like, get someone else from your team to help challenge you, to help simplify some of the messages, because you're probably overcomplicating it. And that's just the nature of your experience, and that's okay, but just get someone to help you out with that. Anyway, so this is, these are just some of the examples of sessions that they got a lot of hits and views, but I'll move on. So this is an example I want to show you that Stephanie actually did a great job with this slide, and she helped put this together to kind of simplify it. Not the whole slide, but this part of the slide is that this is the slide that is basically it's slide like 3 in every single one of our webinars. We have the intro slide, the agenda slide, and then this. And we basically say, before we get into the content, we're going to spend 1 minute about Mytech. And I basically go through this, I or Stephanie does, whoever does the session goes through this content where we tell them, this is what we do, this is who we serve. And at the end, it's typically like, look, if you're interested in having a conversation, this is almost verbatim what we say. If you're interested in having a conversation with us about how we can help you achieve 4 times more value and productivity from your IT investments, please raise your hand. We'd love to have a conversation. But we know that's not why you're here today, so we'll dig into the content. It just really kind of throws it out there. It's not overly pushy, but we want to give people the opportunity to know who we are and to raise their hand and just to say, hey, if you want to talk about it, let us know. We'd be happy to have a conversation. Again, this is
Nate, yeah. for our audience benefit, who are mostly MSPs, tell the audience a little bit more about Mytech, where sure. You guys operate, how big you are, how big you've become, I guess I should rather say, and how you guys have grown, and how you guys are thinking about, how you're trying to grow the company.
So we're a managed service provider. We basically have 2 programs. There's a all-inclusive program and a co-managed program. That's what we've evolved and iterated our services to. We do a ton of work with Microsoft 365, as you saw by the examples of those topics. And if you go out to our resources content on our page, on our website, you'll find that too. But basically we work inside of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul metro area in Minnesota, and then the Denver metropolitan area in Colorado. We have offices in each location. We are currently looking to expand into another geography through acquisition, and we're looking at acquisitions in our existing geography. So right now we're around just under 80 team members, I think 14, 15 million in top line revenue. So if you want to look at it that way, and most of our revenue, we get a good 60% of our revenue is managed services revenue, and then the product and project are the other 40%. So, but most of that, and 90-ish% of our product and project comes from our managed clients. So we occasionally do project work for non-managed clients, and if we choose to do that, it's because we think there's an opportunity to get our foot in the door to earn them as a managed client down the road. But otherwise, all that product and project work is specifically from our managed services base. So I think that answers your question, Ted, as far as who we are and what we do.
Yeah, and you guys started doing webinars like 10 years ago, and you guys have grown tremendously in that time. So how big could you plot or think back, like how big were you when you really started? Because I think that's the big struggle I kind of come across with clients all the time is, people are like, oh, well, we can't do a webinar program. That's too hard, or we're not big enough, or we're not going to get enough attendees. And I'm just always like, start doing it, put a stake in the ground, come up with a program, come up with a cadence, and just begin somewhere. And I know you guys were far smaller when you guys began this effort 10 years ago.
Yeah, I'd say when we first started doing this, our marketing team was half of an FTE, because that person also did procurement, and I was a salesperson who was order-led selling, and we got into a rhythm where the marketing rhythm that we got into, right, wrong, or indifferent, was we had a monthly newsletter that we did, and we did a monthly webinar. And that was our rhythm. And we did that rhythm for probably a few years, because it just got it on the calendar, it got it going, and and we learned from it. And as we've grown, now we have 2 dedicated people in marketing. Stephanie's one of them, and I allocate half of my time, roughly speaking, to marketing. So 2.5 FTEs in that regard, if you will. But the growth has been through, some acquisition. We've definitely done some acquisition, and organic, but it's been, and it hasn't been like I love the success memes where it's like everyone thinks it's just like this, but it's been, it's definitely been rocking. We've had our bumps and our fits and starts, but now we've gotten to a point where we really, like for instance, one of the things that we've gotten it, and we're trying to hone this data even more, but we're going to talk about it a little later. But from a marketing qualified lead perspective, so when prospects say yes to having a meeting with us that we've qualified, that they're at least in our geographic area, they're of the size that we're looking for, et cetera. We've learned that from a marketing qualified lead perspective, not necessarily ones that salespeople have driven on their own, that roughly every between 11 and 12 first meetings, we get a client. So ultimately, that's how we define what our target is as far as generating leads. Is like, if we can generate 12 leads, we know we get a client. And we try and, of course, optimize that and get better at that and use that data. And one of the other things that we'll talk about a little bit later, that Stephanie's put some data around, is that we've learned that when we can get a prospect, whether it's marketing driven or sales driven, when they're in the sales process, again, that they've started the process of looking at us as a managed services provider, if we can get them to attend an in-person event, which we haven't done in the last year and a half, or a virtual event, it significantly increases our probability of winning that business. So yeah, it started from very humble, just trying to get a consistent rhythm down. We only did it once a month, and we even did, like, at some point we were doing quarterly events, but we stopped, because then we'd get all this like excitement around doing a quarterly event, and we wanted to get like 50 or 60 people there, and then we'd get 8, and then we felt like, oh my gosh, all this effort, and we only got 8 people there. Even if it was like 15 or 20, like, we get 60, 70 people on our webinars every other week. So like, and it's way less effort than a quarterly event, so those are some of the lessons we've learned over time, is like, what, like, do them more frequently and smaller, because actually if you do smaller, more frequent, and even if you in-person frequent events where maybe only get 1 or 2 or 5 people there, you can be way more intimate with them from a standpoint of going deeper into the problems that they're having and actually engage them better than you can a larger audience. So like, I got away from the big quarterly events where we try to drive a lot of traffic, got to more frequent events, and even if we just got a few people there, So what? We're doing them more frequently. It doesn't cost us a lot of money. It costs us some bagels and coffee, and you can get way more intimate and deep with them and have a deeper connection with them. So I don't know. I think that talks a little bit about an evolution over the last decade.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, COVID is a, gigantic curveball on all this stuff, obviously. But talk a little bit about your event format, your in-person event format, because you guys were rocking that discipline, I think, for 3 or 4 years, at least from what I could observe outside looking in. But talk a little bit about that format of the Microsoft CIE and in-person events in your various offices, because it's just, I think it's a killer format. So. Good segue. Here we go.
Yeah, I was just saying, thanks for the segue. So this is specifically around, and I'll let Stephanie will talk about this in better detail than I can around some of the execution of some of these details. But yeah, we basically, so several years ago, in fact, there was for those of you that are HTGers or now IT Nation Evolve members, you might recall a Shark Tank that was done many years ago, and one of the ones that the idea that we pitched was to do these Microsoft training events, because we saw, this is about, I think, three and a half years ago now, we saw that clients are moving in this direction, but yet they don't know how to use the tools. I mean, because for the first time in a long time, stuff like Teams was coming out, and these other tools that exist in the Microsoft 365 suite that's different than Outlook, even though it's a new version of Outlook. It's Outlook, right? So that was one of the pitches we had. So we actually got people trained and certified, and we started doing the events that Microsoft calls CIEs, or client immersion or customer immersion experiences, or cloud immersion experience, however you want to call it. And doing them in person, putting 10 to 12 people in a lab environment in your office. And it was a half-day event. And after some time, we actually filled those events full and had a waiting list every month. Again, there's only 12 people, so it's easier to fill, but you're asking for a half-day commitment, kind of a big deal. So we did those half-day events once a month, and then we did like a 90-minute or 60-minute session once a month as well. So we did 2 events a month basically, and the shorter session, again, I didn't care if one person showed, if only one person. I mean, I wanted at least one person, but if it was only one person, we set our expectations and we didn't feel bad. Great, we got somebody that's interested in this topic that we could now have a great conversation with and demonstrate the value of the conversation we can bring. And I think that's, to Stephanie's point earlier of talking about the lower the cost of entry, is that clients in our world rarely get to experience what we do without spending a lot of money. And so if you can get them to the point where you can have a conversation that basically illustrates and demonstrates your ability to provide value to them and solve a business problem that they have, that gives them that much more confidence to be able to spend a lot of money with you when that time comes. But from an executing so those are some of the different ways we've done it. But Stephanie, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the executing the event, because there are some real things that we've learned in that regard in the recent years.
Yeah. I mean, I think to add to the growth conversation that we're talking about is, in the past events, and this is what we're going to kind of lead up to here, we would create an event, whether we were using GoToWebinar or Teams or whatever platform, we would host the event, and then we might post it on our website. And that was kind of the end of it. And that's where I think we started taking a deeper look into how can we, right now, like Nate was saying, we're getting, 60, 70 attendees to these events, and we're not paying to market them. We're posting them on our social media here and there, and then they're on our website. So we're not having to do a bunch of marketing before. And so that would be my first tip, is you don't have to do paid social campaigns and all these to get people to your events. If you make the event topic relevant and solving, the traffic will come from sending out an email blast to your current clients, who then forward it to somebody else that they know, and it's word of mouth. So the first thing is just with the event creation, create it and post it somewhere. So that's just the first trick, is to post it on your website, post it on social media, and always reference wherever it's posted, and you'll get attendance for that. The second one that we kind of learned over the last few years is not all events, like for instance, Microsoft live events, you don't need a registration. I recommend having registration for events, and that's because you can do follow-up emails to, hey, webinar starting in an hour, and if you don't require that registration, how many of us actually, when we register for something, go immediately put it on our calendars with the link and then get a reminder? It doesn't happen. So by requiring a registration, you can then follow up the day before. You can send them an Outlook calendar invite so that they can just pop it open and add it. So you're just making it easier for them. And this is the easier you can make it, the more likely they are to attend. And we currently use HubSpot as a marketing tool. But for those who are maybe not right at that point, I recommend Eventbrite. That's kind of where we started with it because it's kind of all built in. It's easy to set up the event. You can add the links. It creates like a hosting page. It does all the emails for reminders, the calendar invites, everything. So we've moved away from that now that we have more resources in marketing, but that's a great place to start. And then hosting the event. Like I said, whether it's GoToWebinar or Microsoft, it's really your choosing. I just recommend we use Microsoft Live Events because it integrates right into what we're showing and demoing and things like that, so it makes sense. So just take a few moments to think what platform actually makes the most sense for you right now and maybe in the short future, and host the event there. The biggest thing that we weren't doing that I think is what's helping our trajectory go up is event follow-up. So we kind of talked about this earlier too, is what is your follow-up plan, and be reasonable about it, be reasonable about the resources that you have available, and as a person, what would you expect the follow-up to be for the commitment that you gave? So like for us, we send out a recording to everybody who registers, not just to those who that attend, which is, we've been seeing more and more of our regular attendees now know that. So they'll register for events because they know they're going to get the recording afterwards. So we'll send that out. We do post it on YouTube. We're going to get into that here in a minute. We post it on our website. And then we've also set up lead scoring within our HubSpot tool so that we know if someone registers for 4 or more events, or if they attend 2 or more events, there's different scores that we give them to show that we feel at a reasonable, if they've attended 3 events, if they've registered for 5 events, whatever that number might be for you, we feel that's reasonable to then hand to the sales team to say, they're interested. Let's just reach out and see if there's something else we can help them with. Again, you're not going into a full managed service pitch because they attended a couple events, but that gives you to open up that dialogue of, what other problems are you having, and you can start having that. But the follow-up was huge, I think, for us to start actually making use and getting leads from these events. I don't know, Nate, if there's anything else you want to add?
Well, I was just going to say that I tried to, you were segueing kind of to, you were doing some of these details, so I thought that was good. But I would also say that, when you really, it's pretty amazing actually when you, and I don't think we, as intentional, we're way more intentional about it now because we got feedback from our prospects and clients of how they liked the titles of making sure we're solving a problem and we're addressing those kind of things versus talking about a feature. But now we're super intentional about it. And what we found by being really intentional about that, as we've been talking about this session, is that you'll have nearly every conversation you have with a prospect or a client, once you get this rolling, you will have a session that speaks to the problem that they articulated. And you can say, hey, I'm gonna follow up with this. And what better library of resource, which we're gonna show, next, I guess, is we have a huge library of resources that when they say, I'm having problems with, using SharePoint, or gosh, I really struggle with task management, or my Outlook is just a mess. If you do sessions on the problems that people have, nearly every conversation, you're going to be able to follow up and add value, and that just demonstrates that you understand their business and that it gives you an opportunity to follow up on a regular basis. So the other one that I like, I'm going to go back really quick, is that now that we have one of the other team members that we chose to add just about a little over a year ago now, is someone that can do content writing, because that was one of the challenges. If you really be introspective about your time and where your skill set lies, like some of you owner-led folks, if that's still the place you're at, maybe you're great at, Ted. I know I've seen, Ted is a great blogger. I've seen him write. He is able to knock out content, and I don't know if that's just an exhaustive effort for you, Ted, or if you're just naturally good at it. But for me, I can do it. Gosh, it's just I have to put everything else aside. I can't be distracted with anything, and it takes me way longer to do it than someone who's just more naturally inclined to write. And so we hired someone that's basically a content writer that helps us turn video content and dialogue content into published content. And so that's actually something that we've been doing. Is on our website, you'll find not only our past events, where like past recordings, and you'll be able to find them, but on some of them, we've actually done blogs that actually, so now you can basically look at the content in written form, which helps our SEO, helps our lead gen in that regard too. So that was one of the things I really enjoy that we do. We haven't blogged all of them, but we're in the process of going through some of the ones that are getting more attention in particular. I don't know, Stephanie, you're kind of alluding, might want to go there.
Yep. I mean, this is just reiterating. I think the biggest thing that we've seen that has skyrocketed our success with it is YouTube. We've always posted our sessions to YouTube, but just being more intentional about creating playlists and grouping like sessions together and related sessions. And even in the description of YouTube, if we have landing pages that talk about Microsoft 365 consulting, putting a link to that landing page. And this has been over month after month of us going, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this? So it's just, if we can help you avoid and right from the start, just these simple things that don't take too much time, but if you're just very intentional about it, we'll really make them more successful. So.
Yeah, so since you segued to YouTube and some of the videos, I thought maybe you talk about this a little bit. No, you go for it.
Okay. So the result, I mean, ultimately you could put all this work in, but what is the result? In the past year, so really since the pandemic hit, we added over 500 new leads. So when I say new leads, these are net new contacts that we didn't have any exposure to before into our marketing engine, and 75 marketing qualified leads. To what Nate said earlier, what we classify a marketing qualified lead is that they've raised their hand in some way. So this isn't necessarily, some of it a little bit, but this isn't us calling them and asking for first meetings. This is them raising their hand and being like, could you help me with this? Or I want more information, that has led to them working with a salesperson. So this is us passing, saying that they're in our geographic, they are the right size, and they're interested in things that we can actually provide value. So, and one part of that, what we did is we actually, to that lead scoring, looked and said, hey, are there contacts that have attended 4 or more events? And our sales team reached out to some of these to say, just simply, we've seen you're attending events. Is there any other questions you have? Here's another great opportunity for us to ask about content they may want in the future. Is there other questions that you have? And then at least start the conversation to what you said, Ted, earlier, is that they may not be ready now, but in 2 years when their contract's about to come up and now we're in their head and they might reach out. So just this year, we've received 20 leads that were only through YouTube. So we did not market to them. So I like to call this a free lead. It's not necessarily free. It took our time to put the videos out there and stuff like that, but we didn't spend anything on YouTube. I don't think I have it down in the notes there, but one of the things I was looking at yesterday is, and you're going to see kind of our volume of viewers on YouTube. I think it's about 80% of them come strictly from YouTube, not from our newsletter, not from our website. They found us because YouTube said, hey, you're looking for this, you might like this. So these are net new leads that we wouldn't have had exposure to otherwise. And then Nate had mentioned this earlier, just what we're seeing. We have more data, concrete data on the in-person events than we do virtual events, but it definitely increases our closure rate and in the sales process if people are attending these events. To what Nate said, I think we increased when we were doing in-person events, our closure rate, if they attended one of those events, was 95%. So a huge increase. Now virtual is probably not quite as high because it's a little bit less commitment than those 4-hour sessions that we were talking about earlier. And then on top of that, we built a library we have over 50 educational topics in the past 15 months. And this is to what Nate was saying, is there is, but there's a high likely that if there's a concern or a challenge that a prospect has, we probably have a video to support that, which is awesome for the sales team. It almost becomes, even me when I'm doing some follow-up, it becomes a challenge to not send too much. So I'm like, oh, and this video. So it really gives us that big library to choose from. So anything you want to add, Nate?
Yeah, I would just say that, one of the things that closing ratio is dependent upon your sales team doing a good job qualifying prospects into your sales process. And so we found that, nearly every MSP that I'm peers with, that I've ever contacted with in their sales process, there's some milestones. One of the milestones that we really look hard at and qualify heavily out is up to doing what anyone would just generically call an assessment. So at the assessment phase, if they get past that phase, and the data we're looking at that we're referencing is from 2019 because we didn't do in-person events last year. But in 2019, when we got prospects past that assessment phase and they attended one of our in-person events, we had a 95% close rate. So it wasn't ones that, if they didn't get past the assessment rate, but if your sales team did a good job qualifying, then it can really increase that probability. So, and then let's go on to, I know we're running out of time here, so I want to make sure we have some time for some questions here at the end. So Stephanie, you want to, I think this is this I was blown away. Like Stephanie put this data together and this kind of blew me away as far as how things have accelerated.
Yeah, so I mean, just the top one is 2019. So this is before we were doing our monthly kind of webinars, but that was about it. We didn't have a ton of intentionality behind it besides, like we said, we just wanted to get started and get going. And
we were doing in-person events. We weren't doing webinars, we were doing in-person events.
Yep. So, but then 2020, the pandemic hit. So this is really starting in March, April of last year is when we started doing these more frequent and posting them. And, we were super excited in 2020 to see the increase in subscribers and watch time and all that. And then this year has just taken off. I mean, so this is 6 months into the year. We are now at a point where we have the watch time to monetize the channel. We're still working on subscribers, but we're getting there. We're definitely seeing a bigger increase. And again, this is the stuff we've learned of, now we see this goal of, hey, if we hit a certain number of subscribers, we may be even to monetize the channel. So now we're being more intentional about asking them to subscribe, about putting subscribe buttons in on YouTube. There's other things that we can do to help generate that. But as you can see, without a lot of intentionality and just getting the videos out there, we really started that kind of wave. So we're excited to see where this goes.
Absolutely. And so the last thing is just, this is, Ted, you kind of asked a little bit about this earlier, and a couple quick tips. The takeaways: get it on the calendar. In fact, Stephanie, even if there's topics like, hey, we should re-record that, or we want to do this something that maybe we don't want to make an event out of it, but if we don't put it on the calendar, it won't happen. So get it on the calendar. If you publish, if you schedule, it'll happen. So, and then again, have realistic expectations. We started and when we were doing webinars in the beginning, sometimes I actually remember doing a webinar that no one attended live. Because again, there's part of the value is to get people to attend live, but there's lots of other value around getting the webinar done and recorded and to use it in all the other ways that we've talked about. So I think set your expectations that you don't need to have hundreds of people attend a webinar. Even if you get a handful of people or even no one to attend, that should give you a sign that maybe something in your title or description should adjust, or maybe that's not a hot topic that you should try and do or spend more time on, but it still could have value internally as a training mechanism in your social and maybe on YouTube, right? So it's okay. So have clear, realistic expectations and be okay of just getting a small number of attendees when you start. And then I totally agree, and I appreciate Stephanie on this one too, is like, this is not about selling. Like, you're selling by not selling. Right? By educating and providing value, you're demonstrating your ability to solve problems that your clients have or your potential clients have, and that in and of itself is selling. You don't have to try and sell them. In fact, one of the things that our marketing agency advises of is like, look, how many of you, and I would ask you, if you're in a person in a room today, I'd ask you to raise your hand, but when you ever go to a website and you put your information in to download a white paper, how many of you actually want to get a phone call from that company? Probably none of you. So think about that, right? Like, just because people have raised their hand, that's just an indicator that they want to do business with you. And I probably be careful about that, because if you inundate them with emails or phone calls, that you might actually turn them off to doing business with you. So you're really not trying to sell, just work on education, provide value. If you see multiple indicators that they're engaging, like they did download a white paper or they did attend a couple of different events, then reach out and be like, hey, I see that you've enjoyed some of our content or downloaded some of our content or whatever. Is there anything else that we can be of service, or is there anything else that we might be able to help with? We always like to reach out to folks that are engaging, and if they're interested, guess what? They're going to say, yeah, thanks for following up. If they're not, they're going to tell you, and you don't have to waste your time. And then lastly, I do agree, like find some of the tools that are easy and know that you'll evolve over time. Like I said, we've been only using HubSpot the last couple of years, like 2.5 years. But before that, there's plenty of other event platforms and other tools that are out there that are easier to use, that are less expensive to use, or free to use, to find, and that'll work. But just kind of follow some of the steps that Stephanie laid out, and you'll make progress. So I don't know, Stephanie, any final thoughts before we open it up for more Q&A?
No, that's it. Biggest thing is they just get started. I think that's one huge thing that Nate and I have. What's our motto? Momentum over perfection. Get started, get going, and you'll get better. And I don't think anybody can start anything perfected. You're always going to look back and be like, oh, I wish you would have done this sooner. But if you start right now, you'll imagine where you'll be in a year.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. Momentum over perfection. I like that. I like that a lot. So let's do a couple questions. Let's see here. So Ed wants to know, how do you maintain so it's kind of a technical question. How do you maintain two different lists, one in HubSpot and one in ConnectWise Manage, or do you only send from HubSpot and manage and then use manage when the prospect becomes a client? So how do you just manage dealing with ConnectWise and a real marketing platform?
Stephanie?
Good question. I'll take it.
Sorry.
So no, it's good.
Resist that,
I mean, it's the ever, it will be an ever evolving problem, but or challenge. We don't have HubSpot and ConnectWise currently connected. For that reason, is there's some data we wouldn't want going back and forth. The way that we kind of look at HubSpot is that kind of marketing engine top level marketing engine. So leads that are not quite ready, that we're nurturing, that we're sending things. So we do have a list to answer the question directly, we do have a list in HubSpot that I twice a month will export our list out of and update into HubSpot. So I'll export it out of ConnectWise and into HubSpot, so to make sure that any new contacts added by the salespeople and things like that are getting put into that list. But then anything that's coming through HubSpot, through event registrations or downloads or things like that, is staying in HubSpot. And the only way that marketing would bring them into ConnectWise is when they raise their hand to engage with the sales team. Then we put that into ConnectWise, assign it to a sales rep, and now it's in both places because we've actually had an interaction with them. Prior to that, we keep it in HubSpot. Our sales team does have a little bit of access to HubSpot right now, but really we just keep that nurturing and that high level over there. Nate, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
The only other thing I'd say that because we then want to, we as marketing want to then track that when that lead comes through, we actually have gotten to the point where when we hand it over to a sales rep, we actually create the opportunity in ConnectWise, we attach it to an activity in ConnectWise, and we assign the campaign that we want tracked to that opportunity. So instead of trying to rely on the sales team to know what we want there and to make sure that's done, when we hand something over, there's some opportunity there, and so we actually create the opportunity and the activity and assign the right campaign. That way, it makes sure that we can track the data as it comes to fruition or not.
Yep.
In your new logo pipeline, you're actually managing that in ConnectWise. Once it becomes an MQL or an opportunity, that the sales process is being managed in ConnectWise.
That's correct.
And existing clients are managed in ConnectWise. But email communications en masse to existing clients happen back in HubSpot through that monthly kind of harvesting of data and moving it back over into HubSpot.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's pretty clean. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, I think as you guys showed, it's like a lot of work, but each of these tools have what they do really well.
Yep.
And you got to kind of be mindful of that and then really invest the time and effort to manage that process. I think we have time for one more question. We covered a lot of ground. Mimi wants to know how many resources are contributing to the marketing efforts. You said 2.5, but working on who's doing the follow-up? Talk to us about like the follow-up after events. Who's actually picking up the phone and calling people or doing outreach, that sort of thing? What's the
Good question.
post-event follow-up process?
So if for instance somebody during the session were to raise their hand or in the chat say, hey, I want to learn more, we as a marketing team, so myself right now or Nate, would actually connect them with a salesperson. So after the event, I would make sure that we connect them with a sales rep to follow up. As far as once the event is over, kind of our rhythm is what we go ahead and blast out the recording. We've actually set up lead scoring in HubSpot so that it actually tracks whether so I'll back up a minute here. After we do the event, I actually take an attended list and I upload that into HubSpot as well. And HubSpot's looking for all of these things, like did they attend, did they register, did they visit that website, did they watch the recording? It's looking for all these things. And when they hit a certain threshold that we've set up, it sends marketing an email. Hey, this person, we have a score of 100. So this person has hit over 99. And then from there, again, it's either myself, Nate, or our other marketing person will reach out, qualify, make sure, if we can't already see the data in HubSpot, if they're in the right geographic, they are the right size, and then again, connect them with a business consultant. So right now it's a manual process, but we're not making calls after every session to everybody who attended. We're looking for behaviors, and when they've hit a certain threshold, which we set this up more recently, so those thresholds are constantly changing, what's appropriate, what's not. But when they hit that, that's when we take action.
Right, and it's a super qualified lead at that point. So that's like a really high value MQL that's being handed off to those business consultants to take it to the next stage.
Yep.
Yeah, Ted, the only other thing I'd say to that is that, that's how we distinguish lead versus marketing qualified lead, is that we get a lot of contacts that might be, hey, help me out with this. Like we got one yesterday that they called us and said, hey, I need help with plugging in my internet or something like that. It was like it wasn't a good fit for us, but that's still a lead, right? They contacted us from our website and we track that. But sometimes those are like, hey, I need help, and they are asking for managed services, but they're too small for us, or they're outside of our geography. And so what we've tried to do in those instances is actually still help them. Can we refer them to? There's actually a couple of partners, folks in town, in both Colorado and Minnesota, that will hand off smaller leads to that aren't really a good fit for what we do and our minimums that we have. And so, but then that's why when you, like to your point of the highly qualified, that's why marketing steps in, is we try and, before we hand something over to the sales team, and because we want our sales team, again, this is my perspective because I was a sales rep and I, as an owner-led selling, is that I had a finite amount of time and I didn't want to have to chase junk leads. So I want our sales team, every single time we're like, hey, we have a lead for you, that they're excited about it and they want to pursue it, and they'll be assertive and timely in their follow-up and follow-through, as opposed to, crying wolf, and then like they might miss the one that actually is really valuable because we've given them a bunch of junk for them to spend their time on. So that's one of the reasons why marketing, we qualify basically in our, again, geographic, demographic, and size, and are they looking for something that we do before we hand it off to a sales rep. But that's kind of how we go through that process.
And I'll just add, sometimes we do that in a form. Sometimes it's
true.
A call, but we do have some contact forms that will do it, and then we right away see this lead and we'll pass it right away. So it's less work on the marketing team as well.
Sales handoff and what's an MQL, a real MQL for MSPs. I'm sensing another webinar topic, but with that, I think we're out of time. I want to thank our audience for hanging on with us for a couple minutes after the top of the hour here, and thanks for sticking with us through the session. And Stephanie and Nate, thank you guys for a very informative conversation. Tons of great information for the MSP leaders and marketing leaders who are on today's session, and will get to consume this on YouTube on demand at some point in the future. So thank you guys very much for being go-givers and sharing so much great information. This has been another IronPath Expert Series webinar. We look forward to seeing you guys again next month for our monthly webinar. And thank you, and have a great holiday weekend, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, Ed. See you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.